At 3:40 in the morning, a nurse put her hand over mine on the bed rail, and I looked down at it because I could not look at my husband anymore. Her left little finger bent inward at the last joint, a small crook, like it had been set wrong and never was. My mother had that finger, I have that finger. I have spent 64 years apologizing for it in photographs. Ellis had about an hour left. The machines were doing the polite work machines do at the end. And I sat there in a vinyl chair in room 4 with my whole chest coming apart, staring at a stranger's hand, and a thing started assembling itself in the back of my head that I did not have room for. I didn't say anything, not that night, not for 23 days. Because in 1981 I signed a paper in an office in Wheeling, West Virginia, and I was 19 years old, and I held a baby girl for 40 minutes, and then I never saw her again, and I had counted her fingers. My name is Loretta Boone. I'm 64. I drove a school bus for 9 years, and then I did payroll for a plumbing supply company in Columbus for 22, and now I work 3 days a week at a garden center, mostly because the house gets loud when it's quiet. Ellis and I were married 34 years. He was a lineman, Ohio Edison, then the Co-op. If you don't know what that is, he's the man who goes up the pole in the sleet at 2 in the morning so that you can be annoyed about your Wi-Fi. He climbed for 31 years and he never once called it brave, and he would leave the table in the middle of Christmas dinner if the phone rang. In 1998, he took 7,200 volts through his left hand. He was 39. There was an error on a switching order, not his, and a line that everybody in the world would have told you was dead was not dead. Entry through the left palm, exit at the right hip. They flew him to the burn unit in Columbus, and I drove there behind a semi in the fog, doing 45 and praying out loud like a crazy woman. He lost the ring finger and the little finger on that hand. He had 11 surgeries. He was out 14 months. And here's what I want you to understand about the man. He went back up the pole. Not right away. There was a year where he couldn't be in a room with a certain kind of humming. There was a stretch where he'd sit in the truck in the driveway for 40 minutes before he could come in. He had a fear he never named, and he never went to anybody about it, because he was born in 1957 in a town where you did not do that. But he retrained, and he passed the climb, and he worked another 18 years with 3 fingers on his left hand, and he was better at it than men with 10. I mention the hand because I want you to picture what I looked at across a kitchen table for 3 decades. That hand held a coffee cup wrong. That hand couldn't do a shirt button and never once let me do it for him. That hand is what I reached for in a movie theater and in a church pew and in a doctor's office in November of 2024 when a woman with a clipboard said the word glioblastoma and then kept talking. We have 2 kids. Wade's 37, does HAFAC in Grove City, has 3 girls. Kyla's 34, teaches 4th grade in Dublin, married to a good man named Tate who I like more than I let on. And there's a 3rd one. There was always a 3rd one. I had a daughter in June of 1981, before Ellis, before any of this, and I signed her away in an office with wood paneling. And I did not tell my children about her, and I told exactly one person in my whole life. I told Ellis, in 1986, on a Tuesday, before he asked me to marry him, because I wasn't going to let a man say yes to a woman he didn't have all of. He listened to the whole thing. Then he said, okay. Then he said, do you want to look for her? And I said no. I said no in 1986, and I said no in 1994, and I said no in 2009, and every single time it was fear wearing the coat of being reasonable. Ellis never asked me a 4th time. I found out why last year, and it took the floor out from under me. November 12th, 2024. He'd been dropping words for about 6 weeks. Not much. He'd say, "the thing that goes on the truck," and we'd laugh about it, because he was 66 and I was 62, and we had reached the age where you laugh about that. Then he backed the truck into the mailbox post. Then he did it again 8 days later. The MRI was on a Friday. They called us in on a Monday, which anybody who's been through it will tell you is the loudest weekend of your life. Glioblastoma multiforme, right temporal. Dr. Steiner was decent about it. She sat down. She didn't stand over us. She said the numbers plainly when Ellis asked, because Ellis asked immediately. He said, "Just tell me how long." She said, "With surgery and radiation and the chemo, 12 to 18 months. Without, maybe 4. We drove home, and he didn't say anything until we hit the exit, and then he said, "Well, I'm not doing 4. Craniotomy on December 3rd. 6 weeks of radiation with temozolomide. Then the maintenance cycles." And here's where I'm going to be more honest than these stories usually are, because I'm 64, and I don't have the energy to make it pretty. Cancer is not the hard part. Cancer is a schedule. The hard part is a household. Ellis's pension is good, better than most. The co-op did right by him, but he retired in 2021, and we were on his retiree plan with a $5,000 out-of-pocket max, and there is no such thing as a plan that covers the parts of dying that aren't medical. The ramp for the front steps was $340 in lumber, and Wade's whole Saturday. The hospital bed we rented was covered. The bed rails weren't, the first month, because of a code somebody typed wrong. And I spent 11 hours on the phone across 5 days fixing a thing that a person had done in 2 seconds. The ambulance in April, when he seized and I couldn't get him up off the bathroom floor, out of network, $962. There is no in-network ambulance at 4 in the morning. Nobody has ever explained that to me in a way that made sense. We sold the boat in February. 14-foot Lund, 1994. He'd had it since before we were married. A man came and looked at it and offered less than it was worth, and I took it. And Ellis watched from the window and never said a word about it, then or ever. Kyla took family leave and burned all of it by March. Wade came Tuesdays and Saturdays and did the lifting after Ellis stopped being able to get out of a chair on his own. I lost 19 pounds without trying. My sister-in-law said I looked good. I wanted to put my hand through a wall. And there's a whole category of it nobody warns you about, which is the small daily undoing of a proud man. Ellis wouldn't use the shower chair for 6 weeks. He'd hold the towel bar with a hand that had 3 fingers on it and shake, and I'd stand outside the door listening and not go in, because going in would have cost him something he still needed. The day he finally said okay about the chair, neither of us said anything else about it. That's what a marriage is at the end. It's knowing exactly when not to help. By May, he was mostly words I had to guess at. By late May, he was mostly sleeping. June 9th, he spiked a fever and stopped waking up right, and we went in for what turned out to be the last time. 7th floor, palliative care unit, room 4. That's where I met her. I have to take you back to 1981 now, and then I'll bring you forward and I won't jump around on you again. I was 19. I was working the counter at a roast beef place off Route 40 in Wheeling, and living in my mother's house on Poplar. My mother was Bernice Hollis. She raised 3 of us alone after my father left, on a cafeteria job and a second job doing books for a funeral home, and she was hard the way people get hard when nobody has ever once given them a soft place. I understand her better now than I did at 19. I still don't forgive all of it. The father was Dale Rowan. He was 21. He worked at a tire shop. He had a nice laugh and no plan. When I told him I was pregnant, he said he'd think about it, and 11 days later, his mother told me he'd enlisted. That's it. That's the whole story of Dale Rowan. I've never seen him again. I heard in the 90s that he was in Arizona. I told my mother in the kitchen in January. She didn't yell. She put down the dish towel and she said, "Well, we'll take care of it." And what take care of it meant was that by February, there was a caseworker, a woman named Mrs. Pruitt, with a Buick and a clipboard and a plan, and I was in the plan the way a chair is in a room. I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds in 2026. Nobody held me down. I signed it. My hand, my name, the whole thing. But I was 19 and I had $81 and no car and no diploma past high school, and the person I depended on for the roof over my head had made it clear there was one acceptable outcome, and everybody in that office was very kind and very calm, and they all used the same words. The best thing, a stable home, you'll go on and have a life. They called me the birth mother, not by my name, in front of me, to each other, like it was a job title I'd applied for. That's the part that stayed, not the paper, the pronoun. She was born June 14th, 1981, at 6:52 in the evening, 6 pounds 11 ounces. A nurse, I never got her name, she was maybe 50. She had a mole by her eyebrow, and I have thought about her for 45 years, asked me if I wanted to hold her. Mrs. Pruitt had told me it would be easier if I didn't. I said yes. They gave her to me, and I had her for 40 minutes. I'm not going to describe all of it. Some of it is mine, but I'll tell you the 2 things I did in those 40 minutes, because they're going to matter. The first is that I counted her fingers, both hands twice, and on the left hand that little finger sat in toward the others, with a bend at the top joint, exactly like my mother's, exactly like mine, and I remember laughing, actually laughing, out loud in that room, because of all the things to give a person. The second is that I named her, not on any form, out loud, to her, with nobody listening but that nurse. I called her Junie. June for the month. Junie, because that's what you call a baby. Then the nurse took her, and I signed the surrender 10 days later in an office with wood paneling in front of a notary who was chewing gum, and I went back to the roast beef counter on a Thursday. 45 years. People think you either fall apart or you move on. It isn't either. What actually happens is you get very, very good at a specific kind of arithmetic, and you do it in private for the rest of your life. Every June 14th, I knew how old she was. I never had to work it out. She was 4, she was 11, she was 17, she was 26. On her 18th birthday, I made a pot roast, and I couldn't eat it, and I told Ellis I had a headache, and he said, "Okay," and did the dishes, and he knew exactly what day it was, and he never said so, not once, in 34 years. That's what that man was. I did try, twice. In 1999, West Virginia had a mutual consent registry. You sign up, and if the adoptee signs up too, they connect you. I mailed the form in February of 1999 from a post office in Reynoldsburg, and I sat in the car afterward for 20 minutes. Nothing ever came, not a letter, not a call. For 26 years, I assumed that meant she'd looked and decided against me, or that she'd never looked at all, and I could not tell you which possibility I was more afraid of. In 2009, my niece got me on one of those message boards. I lasted 4 days. There was a woman on there who'd been searching for 11 years and had a spreadsheet, and I read her posts and I closed the laptop and I never went back. Because I understood that I could spend the rest of my life doing that, and I had 2 children in the house who needed a mother who was in the room. That's the part nobody says out loud. I didn't stop looking because I stopped caring. I stopped looking because I was already spending 12% of myself on a person who wasn't there, and Wade was 9, and Kyla was 6, and I had to decide where the rest went. I never told them. That's my doing, and I'll own it. There was a year I almost did. Kyla was maybe 20. We were driving back from IKEA, and I got about 4 words in and turned it into something else. I was afraid of the look. That's all. 64 years old, and I'm still afraid of a look. Now, the other thing from those last months, and I need to put it here so it's in your hands before it's in mine, starting around the spring of 2024, before the diagnosis, months before, Ellis took his phone out to the truck. Not every day, Tuesdays mostly, late afternoon. He'd get his keys, go sit in the F-250 in the driveway, and be out there 20-30 minutes. I noticed in about the 3rd week. I want to be a grown woman about this and tell you the truth. For about 9 days in April of 2024, I thought my husband was having an affair. 62 years old, 32 years married, a man with 3 fingers on one hand, who called me from the top of a pole once to say he could see our roof from there. And I stood at the kitchen window and did the small, ugly math anyway. I never asked him, not then. Then in November they said glioblastoma, and the truck calls got folded into everything else, and I forgot about them the way you forget a hangnail when the house is on fire. I didn't find out what those calls were until 8 months after I buried him, and when I did, I had to pull over. Room 4, 7th floor, June 9th. The palliative unit is quieter than the rest of a hospital. Different lighting. They keep it dim on purpose, and after a day or 2 you understand why. She introduced herself the first night. I'm Nell. I'm going to be with you tonight. Janelle Cardoso. Mid-40s, dark hair going gray at the front. Glasses she kept pushing up with her wrist because her hands were always doing something. I'd like to tell you I felt a bolt of lightning. I didn't. I want to be truthful about that because I think people expect there to be a bolt. What I felt was relief. That's all. The kind of relief you feel when somebody competent walks into the worst room of your life. Here's what she did over 7 nights. She learned Ellis. Within 2 days, she knew he hated the blanket over his feet, and she'd fold it back before I asked. She knew the exact position of the bed that made his breathing easier, and she'd set it that way at the start of every shift without a word. She shaved him. 3rd night. He hadn't been shaved in 10 days, and he'd have hated that, and I didn't have it in me to ask anybody, and I came back from the cafeteria, and he was shaved and his hair was combed the way he combed it, not the way a stranger would. I said, "You didn't have to do that." She said, "He's a man who shaved every day of his life. It's in his face." She washed his left hand, both hands, but I watched her with the left one, the one with the 2 fingers gone, the burn scarring gone silver and ropey after 27 years, and she washed it and dried it like it was any hand at all. She didn't flinch, and she didn't look twice, and she didn't ask. 4 nights in, Adaeze, Addie Nwosu, the charge nurse, a woman who ran that floor like a ship, told me something in the hallway by the ice machine. She said, "You know she's not on nights this month." I said, "What?" She said, "Nell's on the day rotation. She swapped with 3 people to be here." And then she looked at me a beat longer than she needed to and said, "She's good. Let her." I thought it was kindness. A nurse who'd taken a shine to a case. It happens. And then there was the thing Ellis did twice that I put down to the tumor. Thursday night, late, he surfaced for a minute. They do that. They come up and go back down. And Nell was on his right side adjusting the line, and he opened his eyes and looked right at her and said, "Clear as a bell, Junie." One word, then he was gone again. I sat straight up in that chair. My whole body went cold. And Nell didn't move. She just kept doing what she was doing with the line. She didn't look at me. She didn't say, "What did he say?" She didn't say anything at all. I told myself it was the tumor. That's what I did. By June, he'd called Kyla by his sister's name, and he'd asked me twice about a dog we put down in 2011. The right temporal lobe is where your words live, and his was being eaten. He said it again Saturday, softer, same word. I still told myself it was the tumor. The mind will do anything to keep a door shut, anything. It will make you deaf in a small room. Sunday night was the last night. I want to give you that night straight, because it's the hinge of everything, and I've never told it start to finish. Sunday, June 15th. Wade and Kyla had been there all day. Around 11, Kyla was falling asleep sitting up, and the grandbabies had been with a neighbor for 2 days, and I told them both to go home. They fought me on it. They went. So it was me and Ellis and Nell. His breathing had changed that afternoon, that pattern where it goes shallow and stops and starts again, and the first time you hear it, you jump out of your chair, and by the 40th time, you've learned to just breathe with him. Nell came in every 20 minutes, and then she stopped leaving. Around 2, she brought a second chair and sat on the other side of the bed, not doing anything, just there. At some point, she said quietly, "Talk to him if you want to. Hearing's the last thing to go." So I did. I told him about the boat and about the fog on Route 33 in 1998 and about the time he called me from the top of the pole. I told him things I'm not going to repeat. I ran out around 3, and then I couldn't look at him anymore. That's the truth. There's a point where you can't, and it's not because you don't love them. So I looked down. She had her hand over mine on the bed rail. I don't know when she put it there. And I saw the finger. Left hand. Little finger. Bent in at the top joint, angling toward the ring finger. My mother had it. I have it. Bernice used to say her own mother had it. It's called clinodactyly. I looked it up at 4 in the morning 11 days later, and it runs in families, and it is not rare enough to mean anything. It is not rare enough to mean anything. I told myself that for 23 days, but I sat in that chair at 3:40 in the morning holding my dying husband's ruined left hand with my right, and looking at a stranger's left hand on top of my left hand, and something in me stood up and started walking around a room I had kept locked since 1981. And I said nothing. I want to explain why, because I think some of you would have spoken, and you'd be right to. Ellis was dying, right there, 40 minutes out, an hour, nobody knew. And whatever was or wasn't true about that woman's hand, the one thing I was certain of was that if I opened my mouth, that room stopped being about my husband. 34 years. He got the room. He'd earned the whole room. So I held his hand, and I let her hold mine, and I kept my mouth shut. And at 4:50 in the morning on June 16th, 2025, Ellis Boone stopped breathing, and it was so quiet that I asked out loud if that was it. And Nell said, that was it. She stayed. Past her shift, past everything. She helped me wash him. She asked if I wanted to, and I said yes, and I'm glad every day that she asked, because nobody tells you that you're allowed. At the door, when I finally left at 8 in the morning with a plastic bag of his things, she hugged me. and she held on about 2 seconds longer than a nurse does. I noticed. I filed it. I got in the car with my son, and I did not think about it again for 23 days, because a person can only hold so much, and grief takes up the whole house. The 3 weeks after a funeral are a strange country. Everybody is at your house, and then nobody is. The casseroles come, and then they stop coming. People say, "Let me know if you need anything," and they mean it, and you never call, and that's nobody's fault. Kyla stayed 9 days. Wade came every other night and fixed things that weren't broken, because that's how he grieves. I did the paperwork, 21 death certificates. The pension office, the Social Security office, the co-op, the 2 insurance policies, the truck title. There's a woman at the Social Security office in Whitehall named Ceci, who was so kind to me that I sent her a plant, and I want that on the record. The survivor benefit on Ellis's pension is 55%. Everybody knows that going in. Nobody knows what it feels like until it's the number on the statement. I went back to the garden center in July because the house at 2 in the afternoon was unsurvivable. That job is $11 an hour, and I do not need to explain it to anybody. You stand in a greenhouse in 90-degree heat telling a woman that her hydrangea is not dead, it's just mad about where she put it. And for 6 hours, nobody looks at you with their head tilted. Grief in public is a performance you have to give. Grief at a register is just a Tuesday. I'd take the Tuesday. And on July 8th, 23 days after he died, I was cleaning out the tote bag I'd lived out of in that hospital room, and at the bottom, under a phone charger and a paperback I never opened, there was a laminated badge on a lanyard. Not his. A visitor badge from the 3rd day that I'd never turned in. And I sat on the floor of my bedroom holding a piece of plastic, and the whole thing came back at once. The finger, the shaving, the swapped shifts, the 2 seconds too long at the door, and Ellis saying, "Junie, Junie." A word that did not exist anywhere in that man's life except in one conversation in 1986, on a Tuesday, when I told a 29-year-old lineman about a baby I gave away. He hadn't been confused. I drove to that hospital. I don't remember choosing to. I got there at 2:15 in the afternoon, and I sat in the parking garage on level 3 for an hour and a half. I did not have a plan. I had a laminated badge and a question I could not make into a sentence. And at about 3:45, she came out of the employee door in scrubs with a lunch bag, walking to her car. I got out. I said her name. She turned around, and I watched her face do something that I have thought about every day since, which was that it did not do surprise. She was not surprised to see me. She was afraid. And when a person is afraid instead of surprised, it means they already know what you came to ask. I said, "I need to ask you something, and I don't know how." She put her lunch bag on the roof of her car. She said, "Mrs. Boone." I said, "Loretta." She said, "Loretta," and she stopped. And then, in a parking garage on level 3, on a Tuesday afternoon in July, a 44-year-old woman I had known for 7 nights said, "June 14th, 1981, 6:52 in the evening." That's how she said it. Not a name, a time. Because those are the only 2 facts she'd ever had about me either. We sat in her car for 2 hours. Neither of us could face a restaurant. Here's her side of it, which I got in pieces that afternoon and in better order over the next year. She was raised in Cleveland by Aurelio and Teresa Cardoso. Adopted at 11 days old through Catholic Charities. Only child. She always knew, they told her early and often, which she says now was the single kindest thing they ever did, and they did a lot of them. She became a nurse at 23. Oncology first, then ICU, then palliative, which she moved to on purpose in her 30s because, in her words, somebody has to be good at the end, and it turns out I'm good at the end. She has a daughter, Ivy, 16 at the time, plays the cello badly and with great confidence. She never searched, not for decades. She said something in that car I've turned over 100 times. I didn't want to find a woman who'd have to explain herself to me. I didn't want to make anybody do that. That's why the registry never matched. I signed in 1999. She never did. Not out of anger, out of manners, out of not wanting to cost me anything. Two women, 26 years, both being polite in opposite directions. Then in 2023, Ivy did a school project on genetics and got them both DNA kits for Christmas, because 13-year-olds do not carry anybody's baggage. And Nell's results came back with a match. Not me. I've never spit in a tube in my life. A first cousin once removed, on my mother's side, my Aunt Verna's grandson, a boy I've met twice, and from him a tree. And from the tree, in about 4 hours on a Sunday, a name, Loretta Hollis, born 1962, Wheeling, West Virginia, married name Boone, living outside Columbus. She had me in 2023, almost 2 full years before that hospital room. She drove past my house in October of 2023, sat at the end of Fairmount Road for 11 minutes, and then drove home to Cleveland, 3 hours, and cried on the turnpike. She did that twice more. And she never made contact, and she made herself a rule about it, and the rule was, she gets to have her life. Then on June 9th, 2025, a patient came onto her floor. Boone Ellis, 68, glioblastoma, comfort care. And in the field marked next of kin, Boone, Loretta, spouse. She said she stood at that computer for a long time. She went to Addie Nwosu and asked to be put on nights in room 4. Addie asked why. Nell said, I know the family. Addie, who has been a nurse for 29 years and did not get there by being stupid, looked at her for a second and then swapped 3 shifts and never asked another question. 7 nights. I asked her the thing I had to ask. I said, why didn't you tell me? And she said, and this is close to exact, because I wrote it down when I got home, because you were about to lose your husband. And there is no version where I walk into that room and tell you who I am and it doesn't become about me. You'd have had to take care of my feelings. In there, that week, I wasn't going to do that to you, she said. I decided you'd never know. I was going to work the 7 nights and go back to Cleveland. Then she looked out the windshield and she said, I thought I was being careful with you. And I said, you were. And then I said, Ellis called you Junie. And Nell put both hands over her face, because she was the only other person alive who knew why. Ellis knew. Not for a week, for a year and a half. Here's how. That Christmas of 2023, Wade and Kyla gave us DNA kits. One of those 2-pack deals. Everybody was giving them that year. I never did mine. It's still in a drawer with the twist ties. Ellis did his in January of 2024. He got a match. A woman in Cleveland with my mother's people all over her results. 42 years old. Born the right month of the right year. He didn't ask me. He didn't tell me. He looked at that screen alone in the den, and he did the arithmetic that I'd been doing every June for 43 years. And then he sent that woman a message. It said, she showed me the screenshot, and she still has it. My name is Ellis Boone. I've been married to your mother for 32 years. She has never stopped counting. Whenever you want, whether that's tomorrow or never, I'll be here. No pressure and no hurry. E. She didn't answer for 3 weeks. He didn't send a second one. Then she answered, and that's what the truck was. Every Tuesday, late afternoon, my husband went out to the F-250 in the driveway and talked to my daughter on the phone. 18 months of it, 50-some calls. He told her about the school bus and the payroll job and the way I hum when I'm mad. She told him about Ivy and the cello and the ICU. He gave her advice about a car. She talked him through his own scan results in December of 2024, line by line, because she reads them for a living, and he wanted somebody to tell him the truth without a clipboard in the room. He never once asked her to meet me. She says he never even leaned. He'd just say, at the end, whenever you want. Nell told me one thing about those calls that I keep. She said he never asked her a single question about the adoption. Not who raised her, not whether she'd been happy, not any of it. He waited 18 months. She said he acted like I'd already given him everything just by picking up. And I stood at my kitchen window in April of 2024 and thought that man was cheating on me. I have had to make my peace with that, and I'm mostly there. Mostly. He had a plan. That's the part. My 65th birthday is December 3rd. He'd told Nell, she has this in a text, dated April 2025, 8 weeks before he died, that he wanted to do it then. Rent the room at the Eagles, get Wade and Kyla and the grandkids there, and walk her in. He wrote, Elle doesn't like surprises, but she'll like this one, and I want to see her face. He died June 16th. There's a leather console in that truck, and I hadn't cleaned it out because I hadn't been able to sit in that truck. And in September, I finally did it. And under the insurance card and about 900 receipts, there was a folded piece of notebook paper. Names, phone numbers, a hand-drawn seating chart for the Eagles Hall. And at the bottom, in his handwriting, which got worse across 2025, and this was late, you can see it. One line, tell Retta she did the right thing. Make her hear it. He wasn't writing that to himself. He was writing me a note through her, because by then he already knew he might not make December, and he wanted the sentence to come from a person I'd have to believe. I pulled that truck over on Hamilton Road and sat there for a long time. I met Teresa Cardoso in October. Nell drove me up. Teresa is 78, 4'11", and she has opinions about how you're sitting. She and Aurelio came from San Miguel in the Azores. She was 22, he was 24, 1969. He was a machinist. She did alterations out of the front room of a house on West 54th for 31 years, hems and zippers and wedding dresses, and she raised her prices exactly 4 times in 3 decades because she couldn't stand to. They tried for 11 years to have a baby. Then they went to Catholic Charities in 1981 and were given an 11-day-old girl. Aurelio died in 2016. Teresa kept the house. She made me eat. That was not optional. And then she sat down across from me and told me the thing I had not been braced for. When Nell was 7, she was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. 2.5 years of treatment at Rainbow Babies in Cleveland. Aurelio's shop had a union plan. Teresa took in twice the alterations and slept in a chair in that hospital more nights than she slept at home. There was a stretch in 1989 they were told it might not go their way. It went their way. Nell has been in remission for 36 years. Teresa showed me a photograph of a bald 7-year-old in a hospital bed holding a stuffed rabbit with one ear. She keeps it on the wall in the hallway, between a wedding picture and a nursing school graduation. in the order it happened, like it's just another thing that happened. That's when I understood why my daughter is good at the end of things. She was 7 years old on the other side of it. Teresa said it to me plainly, with her hands flat on the table. She would not have lived without that insurance card. And then she said, "You gave her to us, and we kept her alive. So we did it together, and we never met." I don't know what to do with that. I still don't, a year later, because the trap I lived in for 45 years was very simple. I told myself a stronger woman would have kept her, that a girl with more spine would have found a way, and I took the easy road, and every good thing in that child's life was an accident that happened in spite of me. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it all came out clean and I forgave myself in a kitchen in Cleveland. It didn't, and I haven't, all the way. But there is a version of 1981 where I keep her. $1981, a roast beef counter, no insurance card. And in that version, there's a 7-year-old girl in 1988 with leukemia. I've stopped being able to say for certain which woman was the coward. I want to say something to you before the last part. If you're carrying something you've never said out loud, a choice you made at 19 or 26 or last year, that you have been quietly serving a sentence for ever since, I'd ask you to consider that you might be the last person in the world still holding it against you. Everybody else moved on decades ago. Some of them are grateful, and you don't know it. If you've made it this far with me, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel and join us every day. Now, there's one more thing, and it's the only part of this that I still can't tell without stopping. Because on that visit, Teresa Cardoso got up in the middle of dinner, went to a bedroom, and came back with a folder she'd kept for 44 years. It was a manila folder, soft at the corners, the adoption paperwork. She put it in front of me, and she said, "There is a card." In 1981, the agency sent along a few pages with an infant. Weight, length, delivery notes, immunizations. And clipped to the back was an index card, handwritten in a hand that was not Mrs. Pruitt's. Rounder, older, blue ink. It said, "Birth mother held her 40 minutes. Called her Junie." That nurse, the one with the mole by her eyebrow, whose name I never got, who's almost certainly dead by now, she wrote it down. Nobody asked her to. Nobody had a form for it. She heard a 19-year-old say a name into a blanket at 7 o'clock at night, and she decided that was a fact worth putting on a card. Teresa said they read it in the car in the parking lot the day they brought her home. And that's why my daughter's legal name, since 1981, on her license and her nursing board certificate, and the badge that hung around her neck for 7 nights in room 4, is Janelle June Cardoso. They gave her my 40 minutes as a middle name, and neither one of us knew it for 44 years. Ellis found out in 2024. He asked her once what the J stood for, and she told him, and he never told me, because he was saving it for December 3rd at the Eagles Hall with everybody in the room. He had it in his pocket for a year and a half, and he took it to the grave rather than spoil it. That's the man I married. That's the whole man, right there. I sat at Teresa Cardoso's table with that index card in my hand, and my daughter put her hand over mine, left hand, that finger, and I did the thing I did in 1981. I counted. She held my hand through my husband's last hours. I held hers for 40 minutes. I've stopped trying to make those two numbers add up to anything, because they don't, and they were never going to. I'm 64. I have 3 children. 2 of them I raised, and one of them raised herself and then came back and buried my husband with me, and never said a word about who she was. Ivy calls me Grandma Retta, She's 17 now. She still plays the cello badly. Send this to 5 people. One of them is sitting on something they've never said out loud, and they've been serving that sentence for 30 years, and nobody's ever told them the door isn't locked. Then leave a comment, a true one. Tell me the name you've never said out loud, or just the year. You don't have to explain it. And tell me what you want the next one to be about. I read every one of them. I'll be here tomorrow.